what this idea of God standing on Jacob or God standing on us when we do what we're supposed to do allows us to go back and redefine the meaning of life according to Judaism, different from what we did when we did the letter Aleph. If you go back to our classes on Aleph a couple of weeks ago, we define good as that which connects me to God and evil as that which distances me. So everyone look up for a second, because I want to do the hand motions for you. If good is that which connects me to God and evil is that which distances me, and I kept emphasizing when we did the class on Aleph, the definition of good and evil have nothing to do with what you like, right? Good is that which connects me to God even if I hate it. Evil is that which distances me even if I love it. But now that we've done the letter Beit, and we see that when God makes you in his image and gives you God-like free will, and then wires your free will into his machinery as to how the world runs. So basically what he's telling you is, when you do good, meaning when you learn Torah and keep mitzvahs, right? And you create a connection to God, you don't realize it, but the impact of that connection is generating positive spiritual voltage, which is traveling the spiritual realm and causing godliness to be brought down closer into your world. And when you lie, cheat, and steal, God forbid, and damage yourself and damage other people, and you're not using Torah mitzvahs properly, as you disconnect from God, you don't realize it, but you're generating negative spiritual voltage, which is traveling up that imaginary wire, negatively impacting the spiritual realm and pushing godliness out of your world. So when we did Aleph, we defined good as that which connects me, evil as that which distances me. But now we got to go back and make a more sophisticated definition of the meaning of life, because really, based on the voltage you generate through your connection or disconnection, when you create positive voltage by connection and you bring godliness into your world, good is that which closes the gap between me and godliness. Evil is that which makes it bigger. So it's not like we did when we simplified it for Aleph, good versus evil. It's really good versus evil. You follow? No?
No, yeah.
You got it? Everyone got it? Good versus evil as opposed to good versus evil. If this is God and this is me. Yeah? Okay, good. If you understand that, good is that which closes the gap between us and godliness, and evil is that which makes it bigger, then certain things in Jewish history that don't make sense will start making sense. For example, if you look at the Talmud's description of the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, you'll see that something like 30 or 40 years before the Babylonian army destroyed the temple, the rabbinic leadership of the Jewish people got together with the priestly leadership of the Jewish people and decided to take the important critical vessels out of the temple and haul them off somewhere and bury them and hide them. We're not sure where they are today. We really don't know. Which means they took the ark out, and they took the menorah out, and they took the table of challahs out, and they hid them. So imagine you lived back then, and you're going to the temple to celebrate something, and you see them hauling off all these important vessels of the temple and taking them out somewhere to bury them and hide them. And you say, hey, what are you taking everything apart for? Are we under attack? Have we been invaded? And they'd say no. And you say, well, are there enemy armies massing on our borders? And they'd say no. And you'd say, well, what's everyone panicking for? Because remember, nowadays with tanks and planes and trucks, you can conquer a country in a day. But, 2,500 years ago, war was slow. As a matter of fact, up until about a century ago or 2 centuries ago, war was slow. Do you remember studying the 100 Years' War between England and France when you were in high school?
Yeah.
Wars were slow because soldiers wore armor, and it was hot, and there's only so many miles you can march in a day, and you have to eat and sleep and rest and train and practice. Do you know when the Babylonian army finally invaded us 30 or 40 years later? It took them 18 years to conquer the country. That's how slow the invasion was. 18 years from the time they crossed our borders to the time they destroyed the temple. So now, you're visiting the temple and they're hauling everything out to bury it and hide it. You say, hey, 1 second. If we hadn't been invaded and there are no enemy armies massing on our borders, what is everyone panicking for? Would you mind putting everything back and trying to visit the temple? And they'd say, well, it's going to be destroyed. So 1 second. It's likely that the Babylonian general who destroyed the temple probably was not even born yet. So why were they taking the building apart and hiding it? The answer is because they understood this class. Yeah, who do you think that the rabbinic leadership of the Jewish people were watching over the course of that century to determine whether the temple was going to be destroyed. Who are they watching? The Jews, because the Babylonians didn't have the voltage to destroy the temple. The Babylonians were non-Jewish. They had 7 mitzvahs, of which they kept 0. So if you're keeping 0, your free will muscle's incredibly weak. You don't have the voltage to destroy the temple and push God out of the world. No, the rabbis had been watching the Jewish people, and we weren't keeping mitzvahs properly, and we were disconnecting, and they knew the negative voltage from that disconnection was pushing godliness out of the building, so to speak. And therefore, once you push God out of the building, it's destroyed. Because the temple was never about a building. The temple was about closeness to godliness. And therefore, we had destroyed it already. So then they knew they had to hide it. And they figured that God was going to bring some Gentile army in to knock the empty building down so that the Jews who didn't understand this principle, Jews who were, let's say, not so aware of Torah principles, would think, well, the building's there, everything must be okay. And the rabbis are going, no, it was never about the building. God brought the Babylonians in to knock an empty building down so you Jews would know you're in trouble. And I don't want to get political here because I'm being videotaped, but it's been 2,500 years. Nothing's changed. You want to stop Hamas, you want to stop Islamic Jihad, you want to stop Islamic terrorism, whatever the case would be. It's not going to be political. It hasn't been political in 2,500 years. Not for the Jewish people. God says, you want to stop them? Use Torah and mitzvahs to connect to me. Bring me closer into your midst. They won't hurt you. You want to reject me and push me out of your midst by becoming like the other nations? Then you become vulnerable to them. So it's not going to be the United Nations. It's not going to be peace deals, whatever. Oslo didn't work. God says, don't kid yourself. For the last 2,500 years, there's never been a political solution. It's really how we bring God into our midst that protects us from. That's not to say we don't need an army. We do need an army. We need a police force. That's not what we're talking about. But ultimately, not being threatened by them is based on connection. Okay? So now, that more complex definition of good is that which connects me, evil is that which distances me, not only explains why they took apart the temple decades before the Babylonians invaded, it actually allows us to go back and answer the question we had before, and that is, why does the letter of connection or relationship, the bait, why doesn't it face the aleph, face the goal? Because I'm here to connect to God. Good is that which connects me. Why did God graphically design it facing away? So the answer is, it would face the aleph if the definition of the meaning of life were the simple definition we used when we did the letter aleph of good is that which connects me to God. But we see now, based on the fact that we're created in the image of God, which gives us godlike free will and it's wired into the machinery, that no, the real impact of us connecting to God is generating a voltage where we take godliness and we bring godliness out into the world. And that's why the bait faces the aleph. It means ultimately our free will decision-making can take that relationship we have with God and give godliness its expression out into the world. That's why it's facing away. It's almost like the bait is taking the aleph and expressing it out into the rest of the alphabet. So that's the more complex definition of the meaning of life. This would be the simpler definition of the meaning of life. When I do good, godliness flows into my world. When I do bad, I push godliness out of my world. Okay? So that's the direction of the bait. And next class we'll start a discussion on the actual structure of the bait, why it has such a box-like shape. Okay, we'll stop over here.